Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the latest episode of If Data Could Talk with me, Andy Cotgreave, your host. In this show, we find the best data stories and best use cases and try and dissect what it is that you as a data leader or data analyst can learn from those things we find. And this week we have a historical episode, possibly not because we're making history, although who knows what's going to happen in the next 15 minutes, but because we're looking back in order to take some perspectives from history that we can apply today in 2020. I'm really excited because today we're going to be looking at Florence Nightingale and the visualizations she made back in the 1850s. She was a pioneer of data visualization, and she was born 200 years ago in May this year. So it's a great time to look back, celebrate what she stood for, and think about what we can still learn from her today. So, as I said, I'm Andy Cotgreave, your host, and I'm joined today by Amanda. As always, Amanda, say hello. Give us a quick introduction.
Hi, Andy. I'm Amanda Makulec. I'm the Senior Data Visualization Lead at Excella and the Operations Director at the Data Viz Society. Excited to dive into this history around public health visualizations.
Fantastic. Great to have you with us again, Amanda. And RJ Andrews, you and I have been on many data visualization history adventures together. Thanks for joining us today. Just say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is RJ Andrews. I make maps, charts, and diagrams. I also collect historic data visualization, which fills me with a lot of inspiration and practical design tips.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to have you here. If you want to check out some of RJ's work, go check out his book, Info We Trust, and the website is infowetrust.com. So let's transition. Let's have a look at Florence. We're going back to the Crimean War, which was in 1853 to 1856. And Florence Nightingale was there tending to ill and wounded soldiers. And she saw that more soldiers were dying in field hospitals than on the battlefield itself, and that they were dying of curable diseases and infections. On the return to the UK in 1858, she worked with others on a report for the UK government titled Mortality of the British Army. And in that report appeared these charts, her famous rose diagrams or coxcomb charts. They proved her skill and understanding in how to persuade and inform with data. And as a result of this report, and no small part because of these charts, hospital sanitation was completely transformed, saving the lives of countless millions of people following the adoption of their proposals. So these visualizations changed the world. Let's have a look at what is going on in the charts. We have the number of deaths categorized by type of death over a 2-year time period, and the color shows the different types of death. So there's 2 years in the diagram. On the right-hand side is kind of the earlier period, 1854 to 1855. And on the left-hand side is the latter period, 1855 and 1866. Each little segment radiating out from the center represents 1 month. The year starts in April and rotates clockwise from sort of the middle left. So we're seeing a 12-month period within each diagram. And the size of the radiating bar shows the number of soldiers dying in that month. And it's this size and the coloring which really punches home the insight she was trying to share. The lighter blue colors are preventable, curable diseases. The dark gray, blackish color are wounded soldiers dying from wounds, and the red is all other causes. So that combination of color and size tells you everything Florence wanted to know about when she created this chart. Basically, there's loads more blue than black, i.e. many more soldiers are dying from preventable diseases than they are from wounds. This was a profound, but obvious in this visualization, revelation. And she wanted people to realize this: hospitals needed to change. And the chart shows it in a stark, visceral, undeniable way. So that's kind of why the chart was so influential at the time and is still held up as a great example for us all today. It's fascinating to study this chart and the bigger picture around what Florence Nightingale was doing at the time. So if you're a data analyst or a lead data strategy development, there's lessons for all of us here. I'm going to share one lesson. Amanda's going to tell you a little bit about her perspectives, and then we'll dive into get some more depth from RJ. So my favorite piece on this is that in preparing this mortality report, she was working with her friend and mentor, William Farr, who was another pioneer in the collection of statistics in this Victorian period. And the two of them had a fierce correspondence during the report's production. He did not want her to put the charts into the report. And this is what he said. He said, "Florence, you complain that your report would be dry without the charts. The drier, the better. Statistics should be the driest of all reading," he said. And this is why Florence was so amazing. She pushed back and said, "Well, Mr. Farr, I don't think anybody would read printed tables in double columns. This report is for the vulgar public." Now, I might not use the words vulgar public in 2020, but her point is perfect. People want insight. They want it quickly. And there is no better way to do this than actually show the data in charts that are easy to understand and can convey a point very, very quickly, much more effectively than tables and charts could do. So that, for me, is why Florence was just worthy of being, has a place on the sort of pedestal of being an incredible data viz pioneer. Amanda, I know you've got some love for this chart too. What is it you like?
So as a public health professional, I think oftentimes we feel like, especially in government reports, that you're kind of throwing things out in the ether, right? You're kind of throwing things out that are being reported just for the sake of having the numbers documented somewhere. And to me, the piece that really resonates is the fact that there was a person behind these and an advocate. And the power of charts is part of overall advocacy. I think your point about kind of how novelty and innovation draws people in and gets people to stop and pause and pay attention is what really strikes me about these charts, because like many other charts, you can go ahead and start making arguments about should have been a bar chart, should have been a line chart, but would someone have paid as close of attention to it if they hadn't seen it presented this way? And so I think there are times that we go ahead and we are willing to shift away from precision and the challenges of comparing the relative size of these different segments, shifting away from precision over into focusing on something that draws folks in. It makes me think of other kind of novel and innovative chart types that we see that, if nothing else, spark dialogue and conversation. Love them, hate them. The tornado chart that popped up this week, looking at kind of what happens as we kind of look at what happens with change over time. Sometimes the goal is to zoom back and kind of squint and zoom away and think about, what do you see when you kind of look at these kind of charts? And it is impossible to miss the kind of relative sizing of the colors. And for me, that's what makes this really sticky, is the idea of someone who themselves was an advocate, and that we listen to our clinicians. We listen to people who are seeing these things firsthand and let them be advocates, and let them be advocates who use data to go ahead and persuade us to do different things in the public space.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I've got a slide showing here that I tried to redraw these charts as bar charts and area charts and various other things, and none of them packed that visceral punch and that instant understanding that this innovative approach did. So yeah, I wholly concur with you there. So RJ, what is it? Just tell us something about this chart that you particularly like as well.
So if we were to imagine making this chart today with our modern tools, it would be in a category of visualization that I think we call custom viz, or maybe bespoke viz, which means that it would take some hacks or some custom coding, at least some special attention in order to make it. And that's because Nightingale and Farr are not shoehorning their data into a template. What they're doing is they're constructing a visual form that best tells the story of the data, and it tells the story that they want to tell. This presentation is not a tool of exploration or analysis. It's not a tool, as you said, of precision. It is a tool of communication, persuasion, maybe even propaganda. As you said, this chart is not made for the data literate. This chart is made for the vulgar public, as Florence Nightingale wrote. But when she said vulgar public, she doesn't mean the common street urchin, sort of Oliver Twist, an Artful Dodger running around London. What she meant by vulgar public was the data illiterate power elite in London. And so after she says the vulgar public, she actually lists out who are the vulgar public. And at the top of that list is the Queen and Prince Albert.
Amazing. And something I really like in what you said there is you're touching on something a lot of our viewers will be interested in. They think, well, BI, business intelligence, is about dashboards. And, I wrote a whole book on the topic. But I think you might have a little bit more to say on that. Do you think in business, is your experience that people maybe lean one way a little too much?
Dashboards are very useful, and they're very useful from a documentation and reporting perspective. Sometimes dashboards are also instruments of CYA. But a dashboard in the moment, I don't think beats out a data story. And what I mean by data story is it's a presentation that has some sort of communicative purpose, that there is a maybe narrative, or at least a messaging goal in the presentation. And to create a data story is much more difficult. It creates manual, again, custom, special effort. And in appearance, a data story might look very, very similar to a stock data visualization data chart. It's hard sometimes to talk about business intelligence dashboards because everything is behind the cloak screen of NDA. However, think about data journalism, and we can use data journalism as an analog, because in data journalism, some of the most visited sites, stories of the Washington Post, the New York Times, are these custom data journalism stories. Now, the New York Times and Washington Post also have dashboards. They have common financial market watch type charts that are updated every day. They have charts about the weather. Guess what? Those pages are not the pages that are getting the record impressions, right? It is the absolutely bespoke custom visualization where the form is tailored to the story, not the other way around.
Yeah, Amanda, I'll come to you for some perspectives on that in a second. I mean, I think you've just nailed one of the really difficult choices people have to make as they think about what they're doing in their organizations. It's like, well, dashboards are easier to build and they sort of sit and they churn around. But what we really want is persuasive information charts. And oh my gosh, they're really hard work to do, right? So it's very difficult to develop the engine that can create these and a culture that responds to the fact that they are really valuable, but they take time to build, but they are demanded very quickly. It's a real difficult balancing act, I think, in organizations. Amanda, any other additions to that?
Well, it speaks to kind of what my day-to-day job is, right? So I work as a consultant building oftentimes BI tools and dashboards, but oftentimes talking about this distinction between what's the purpose. Is it explanatory or is it exploratory? And I think one of the challenges that we face is that dashboards can often be a tool to identify where we need to dive deeper, and they should be a place for identifying and finding questions to probe on and try to understand why something happened, because we're often challenged with the fact that dashboards are meant to display millions or billions of rows or records of information quickly. And we have these other constraints around speed and around performance and around kind of having something that can be a tool that operates over time versus something that can be kind of a really well curated, beautiful story. And I think of just some of the work that RJ has done around some of the different data portraits and other pieces that he's created. To automate those in a business context would be impractical. But we can find ways to kind of identify what questions to ask and then probe and use charts to unpack and explore those questions in more meaningful ways. And to me, it speaks to what kind of product we're delivering and how we need different kinds of products and tools for different purposes and different audiences.
Yeah, product. I like that. That's a good business way to communicate it to decision makers, isn't it? About product. I like that. All right. So thank you both. Now, you know a lot about Florence Nightingale, RJ, and I think we wanted to dig into, she was a very particular person. She had an incredible personality, which I think drove her to get to be able to do this. So just tell me something about her personality that our viewers could, think, okay, maybe we can lean into that kind of skill or recruit that kind of person. What was it that drove her?
So she is a very multifaceted, complex personality, and all the facets are worth exploring. But one in particular resonates with my own work today, and that is that Florence Nightingale was inspired by the birth of social science. And social science sort of roars out of France in maybe the 1830s. And so by the time we get into the 1850s, we still have its founders alive and in communication actually with Nightingale. And so she's talking to the founders of social science. And the big idea behind social science is something that I think excites all of us, which is that when you collect data and you aggregate it and you look at it in a way that's impossible to look at life in any other way, you can see patterns that emerge. And these patterns are not patterns that are the result of any one particular person's decision. These are patterns that emerge from the collective society. And when you're able to identify these patterns, you're actually able to make high-level policy decisions that can improve everybody's life. And Florence was very much in touch with this. Was in touch with this effort, and she considered it a moral effort. That it is our job to understand, to observe, and then to improve everybody's life. And I believe that. Especially right now, more than any other time, we've realized how important the collective body is. How really what lives outside of ourselves impacts us more than anything, right? Because we have a global pandemic ravaging the world. And so it's that spirit of being able to step outside of ourselves and use data, analytics, visualization, to float up to almost a godlike view, right? Looking down and understanding the bigger picture. And that's something that that Florence Nightingale was motivated by, and it's something that I think motivates all of our work, whether we've realized it yet or not.
Yeah, amazing. And I know you own some of Florence Nightingale's original artworks. And actually, Amanda, I don't know how much of a historical data viz nerd you are. I know RJ and I are very open about that. Do you follow the history threads?
I feel like I've learned a ton about historical viz we have a whole dedicated channel and a whole section on our Nightingale publication. Our DVS publication is named after Florence Nightingale for the transformational power of her work. And so I've learned a lot about it and find it fascinating to see kind of where the roots of different chart types are besides the kind of standard going back to the lines and the bars. Yeah. Isotypes have really caught my attention lately, maybe because of how much we've been writing about them. Yeah,
the isotypes maybe for another episode. I know RJ's been collecting some of those as well. But RJ, so I think, okay, we're all history data visitors here. And I always want to convey to anybody listening, anybody who will listen to me, that going back and looking at these historical pieces is incredibly valuable for learning today. But I think there's also some specific stuff about seeing the originals, because there's something from those that we can take away. And RJ, you've been collecting these. What is it about having the real thing or being able to go and see the real thing somewhere that just captures you so much?
So yes, I have I have a copy of Florence's charts, which so there's a set of rose diagrams in this publication, which isn't useful to actually reveal on screen. So why look at historic visualization? There's a lot of reasons. So one is that they're just aesthetic artifacts of beauty. You can delight in the textures and the colors and the fineness of the engraved lines. It's just they bring a certain joy just because of as a painting might in a museum, at least to some of us. But from a more practical perspective, they reveal that they're the unique information design solutions that historic creatives arrived at. And so you can imagine that they operated in a vastly different context. They had different tools, they had different data, the world was different. However, they really were serving the same problems, the same goals, in that they had complex data that was too large to manage. And they had mostly data illiterate audiences, and they had to somehow create some sort of meaning for those audiences. And what's so interesting looking at historic visualization is you can see that because they have a different context, they arrived at solutions more easily than we would today. They arrived at different solutions than we would today. So you can look at their work and say like, oh, look at how they did that. That's really interesting. That's not something I would ever thing to do, but now I can maybe incorporate that into my toolbox of possible solutions. The other thing is that when you look at historic work and you see how they did things, you realize how much that context shaped their work, how much having a lithographer on hand, how much having, a very small canvas or sometimes a very, very large canvas shaped their work. And it reminds you, it really puts in your face how your work is also shaped by the modern context. You're making bar charts in a certain way because of your tool stack. And so helping you recognize how not limited, because tools are incredibly empowering, but how tools do force you into certain grooves. And once you see those grooves, then you can also see that, there is opportunity outside of those grooves, and maybe weigh how much effort's going to take to climb out of those grooves. So that's some of the practical stuff related to historic visualization. But historic visualization, I think, is more powerful than even that. And that is because when we celebrate the history of data visualization, we in fact are elevating and enhancing our work today. It connects us in some way to a 400-year history of statistical visualization. It connects us to generations and generations of creatives who did this work and helped create the modern world using data, using information graphics. And then finally, Andy, we've had so much fun talking about historic visualization, visiting rare books collections, going to libraries. Historic visualization is a wonderful social coordinator today, because it's something that we can all join together in. We can learn about, we can delight in it, we can debate in it. It's really just a constant supply of connection for me, whether it's remote through the Data Visualization Society Slack channel, going on field trips to museums, libraries, or hosting people and giving them tours of my own collection.
That is absolutely fantastic. In fact, you know what? I think everything you said there was just so perfectly put. I think we could just wrap up this episode here, because you framed everything there perfectly. So I hope everyone listening has taken something really interesting from that, because just go and check this stuff out. It is amazing. RJ has nailed it there. So that just about wraps up our episode today. If you want to go find out more about RJ's work, go check out infowetrust.com. In the comments below this video, we're sharing a couple of links to some articles by RJ and a post by me trying to redraw Florence Nightingales and not improve them. That was the point. Also, if you want to go develop any of the new skills yourself, then go check out Tableau's e-learning site. We've got free e-learning available to you for 90 days. And other than that, please leave your comments. Let us know what you're liking. Let us know what you think of Florence Nightingale or other historical visualizers. And with that, Amanda, thanks very much for joining. Have a great day. RJ, thanks so much for joining and sharing some incredible insight. And we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.